Let's talk money and the typical investment and how people that move forward, Gus, actually fund a franchise.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because it is one of the, I think, can be one of the self-limiting beliefs that hold people back. I don't have enough money, right? I don't have X pile of money lying around. The reality is it can vary depending on how you approach it. It can be as little as I would say 75 to $100,000, all in, up to way into the hundreds of thousands. Even, somebody does retail, which I typically don't direct folks to. I would say most of my clients are probably investing anywhere between 100 and 200,000, and that includes franchise fee, which could be anywhere between 50 and 100,000, depending on how many territories they choose or acquire, and then working capital. You can even get funding to pay yourself. So I've had cases where I've had clients, that bought on the lower end of the investment spectrum where they were able to get a small business loan, an SBA loan, they call them, for up to $150,000 where they just had to put in 10% of their own money. So they put in 15, borrow 150, and part of that can fund the franchise fee, working capital, even paying themselves while the business is ramping up. So I would say it doesn't have to be a big investment. Sometimes I think people equate the bigger the investment, the higher the ROI. I've often found the opposite
Mm.
because the more overhead there is, the more you have to push, to get, to a higher revenue level. And oftentimes with retail, you run into a capacity constraint where if you want to grow, I got to add another location and another location. Where if it's a service business and it's all about market penetration, yeah, maybe you're adding more people as, as variable cost or vehicles, but you can scale it quicker and for less expense and less capital, going the service-based route. So that investment, it can vary, but it can be as little as I would say 100 to 150 or
Mhm.
75 to 100 probably on the lowest end. And then in terms of how people fund it, it varies. There's certainly SBA funding out there, where you can put in as little as 10 or 20% of your own money and then borrow the rest from, from a bank with its SBA guaranteed. I have a lot of clients that utilize a program called ROBS, which basically you could refer to it almost as a self-directed IRA. It's a way where you can invest a portion, not all of it, a small portion of your IRA directly in your business without incurring tax penalties. So I would say 60% of my clients wind up utilizing that because there's some definite tax advantages both on the front end and the back end when you go to sell it. I just helped a couple use a home equity line of credit. It was on the smaller end where it didn't make sense for them to apply for a traditional loan. So they used a HELOC to fund their business, which gave them a little bit more flexibility. I've seen people do securities-backed funding where, if they have securities that are outside of their 401k, you can get a loan against that cheaper than you can an SBA loan. And friends and family. I'm seeing a lot more millennials and maybe even some Gen Z getting their parents, hey, mom and dad, I want to invest in a business. And, it's sort of the generational wealth transfer. And in lieu of me waiting for you to pass, how about investing in this franchise, assuming all the numbers add up? And I'm even seeing parents do it in concert with their kids.